Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening. Welcome to 365 Deep Dive. He's John Moore. I'm Andy Honeycutt. And today we've got a pretty awesome show lined up for you. This is promptly organized Microsoft Copilot prompt libraries for your organization. A lot of cool stuff that we're going to dive into today. But first, we got a little bit of an announcement that we want to share and broadcast with everybody.
Mhm.
John and I have been doing this now for 3 years, and a lot of you have been joining in with us, each month as we're on this journey. But we wanted to kind of take it to the next level. And as part of that, we're excited to announce that we are kind of setting 365 Deep Dive up to be its own entity. We've got a brand new YouTube channel launching for it. If you're joining in with us live today, we're going to put that link in the chat window and you can subscribe. We've got that up on the screen right now. Additionally, to kind of keep the community effort going, we thought that the single YouTube channel would be a great place to drive engagement because right now we're kind of scattered across a whole bunch of different locations. But we wanted to kind of
Mhm.
consolidate it a little bit and give everybody kind of one place to engage with us. But we also want to build a community. And as part of that, we're also going to launch a website, 365deepdive.com. That's going to be coming soon. And in addition to being able to get to some of the show notes and some of the links and the resources that we provide, we also want to be able to give you a place to engage with us. Kind of one-stop shop for all things 365 Deep Dive. We're really excited
Mhm.
about the journey that this has been for the last couple of years. We're really excited about the next steps. We've been talking about it for a little while, and we're putting it into practice. So we hope to see you at the center of 365 Deep Dive moving forward. That being said, we are going to continue to stream to our various channels for the next few months as we kind of work toward putting
Mhm.
that into that central location. But it's pretty exciting. We're really geeked out to do this and kind of take it to the next level. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work, but we really enjoy doing it. So we wanted to
Yeah.
lead off with that bit of news here today.
Yeah. So we're live right now on the new channel. If you scan the QR code in the upper corner, or if you go to the link in the description or the link in the chat, we're just at 365 Deep Dive on YouTube. We just built it yesterday and we're live streaming to it today. So, as Andy mentioned, we've been fragmented across several different platforms, and the chat kind of gets spread out. People don't see each other quite as much. So we want to try to centralize it into two places eventually so that we'll have the single YouTube channel, the single LinkedIn page, and we're going to have LinkedIn, YouTube, website. That'll be kind of like our main, delivery mechanisms. That way you guys can, kind of come together and actually see each other a little bit easier in the chat, stuff like that. I think the idea is we will do this long form content, live streaming out, the normal 2 hours once a month to the YouTube channel. Then the YouTube channel, we're also going to chop up little nuggets and do special YouTube shorts on that channel. So a little bit of more short form content between the live streams. And then we're looking to probably take this big, long 2 hour long video and turn that into sections, right? So we'll typically talk about a segment for like maybe 10 or 15 minutes. And I think that would be good for us to chop that up and then publish it to our own YouTube channels, right? So that we've kind of got content, coming to you throughout the month so that it's not just all at one point and you got to sit for 2 hours, to capture all of it. We want that to kind of be the main driver, but we want to be able to sprinkle out content so that, if people want to kind of snack on something a little bit between our live streams, that will give them the opportunity to. So, yeah, as Andy, as you said, we're going to be doing all the places for like now, probably until the summer. And then we're thinking maybe like in July might be whenever we kind of sunset our own channels, do this central channel for the live stream specifically. So that's why we kind of want to get all of you guys subscribing over there. But
And the
uh,
main thing is we want to create a community. We want to create a place where we can all engage. We love the live feedback. We love the Q&A that happens during the show. We want to keep it going in the weeks in between. So we thought it would be good to kind of centralize all of the comments and content and commentary kind of in one place. But we also recognize that we can't do it all through YouTube. That's the reason for the website as well, because we do share resources, we do share content. So we want to give you a place to go and find that information as well. So we're
mhm.
just kind of getting started on the journey. We hope you will join us as we work toward it. Your feedback is definitely going to help with that along the way. But thank you all for tuning in.
Yeah,
And with that, why don't we go ahead and dive into today's show, because we've got a lot to cover. It's pretty ambitious
yeah,
as we always do, but today is about prompting. And
mhm,
specifically, we really like the punny title that we created for this one: Promptly Organized, Microsoft Copilot Prompt Libraries for your org. So let's break that down just a little bit, high level, what we're going to be talking about in today's show. We have three main pillars that we're going to be covering. Part of that's going to be prompting. We're not going to do a super deep dive into prompt engineering because we could easily spend a couple hours on that. We want to hit three main points: prompt engineering basics. We also want to talk about things like crafting good prompts. And once you start doing that, once you start learning to talk to Copilot or Chat GPT or whatever your generative AI tool of choice is, once you learn to start prompting, you want to start saving those prompts. You want to start organizing them because you want to be able to quickly recall them and get back to them. And even though this is advertised as natural language, if you don't know what's on the menu, you don't know what to order. And if you don't know what you ordered the last time, you don't remember what you like. So you need to make some notes along the way. So we want to talk about how you can organize your prompts, whether they're for personal use or whether they're for sharing with your other teammates and colleagues. And then we want to talk about sharing and publishing those prompts and some best
mhm,
practices kind of along the way. And being completely transparent about this, I started thinking about this idea months ago as I'm searching back through previous conversations in Copilot, previous conversations in Chat GPT. I'm like, oh, I did this one really cool conversation. What was it? And so I wanted to try to like organize and get back to some of that information. And then a few months ago, we did the deep dive where we introduced the Copilot notebook. And one of my pieces of feedback there was I really like notebook, but when I hear the word notebook, I think note taking. I think
yeah,
organizing my thoughts. I think being able to search and get back to that content. And that kind of stuck in the back of my head. And then there was a feature released about sharing prompts. And I'm like, all right, there's a deep dive here. So we've been talking about it, and we're going to just walk through how to craft good prompts, how to organize prompts, and then some ways to share and publish those prompts so that you can get back to that menu and you can get back to your favorites and reuse
mhm.
them without having to spend a whole lot of energy trying to remember what you did the last time and you got really great results.
Yeah. So let's dive right in with the art and science of prompting. So, crafting good prompts. This is a concept called prompt engineering, but we want to step back a little bit and define what is a prompt. So that sounds like kind of a technical term potentially. It sounds to me kind of like an academic term. So rather than thinking technical, I like to think a little bit academic. Like when you were in school, you got a writing prompt for creative writing. I want you to write about this thing and do a report, right? That was a prompt your teacher gave you. So rather than getting bogged down in the technical, think of it more from that perspective. You are the person who is prompting. And a prompt in generative AI is just the instructions or the question that you give to a large language model like Copilot to get a response back. It's what you put in, and you're going to get something out of it. Um, Imagine if you're talking like to a highly skilled assistant and they can do a ton for you, but they can't do everything for you. And especially they can't read your mind. That's the big point here is, you have to provide enough stuff to make the LLM give you a high quality or a good result. Now, The analogy I like to use is I have a 6-year-old son, my youngest son, he's in kindergarten, and he can unload the dishwasher, which is like the best trick that you can teach a 6-year-old. I love it. It's very helpful. The problem is if I tell my 6-year-old go unload the dishwasher, chances are the dishes are going to end up in a very strange spot. He might unload the dishwasher and just put them on the floor for all I know. He might put them on the countertop, you know? So what I need to do if I want my 6-year-old to be successful is I need to say, "Will you please unload the dishwasher? I want you to put the plates over here. Please put the silverware in this drawer. Also, I need you to put the forks separate from the knives, separate from the spoons." I need to give him what he needs, the context he needs to be successful. The same thing is applicable to a large language model with generative AI. Now, so the prompt engineering is how you enhance your instructions or your request. So prompt engineering is just crafting better instructions to get a better response from Copilot. Now, I've got like 3 examples here that come from Microsoft actually, where they talk about the ingredients of a prompt. And you can see that like I could say, help me prepare for a meeting that I've got coming up. And if I just leave it with that, who knows what's going to come back? The format might not be very readable. It might just be paragraphs of text. Who knows where it's going to pull it from, that type of stuff. So you start out and you're just like, you're thinking in like Google search terms, right? It's like, I want to get as little text as possible to just get search results. Well, with a large language model, if you give it a little bit better context and say, "Hey, I'm preparing for this meeting. We're going to talk about our audit engagement with this client, and I want to get up to speed quickly." You're giving it a little bit more of a nugget of information. And then a really good one is if you say, "Hey, I'm preparing for this meeting with this client. This is what we're going to talk about. By the way, I want 3 to 5 bullet points. I want to be able to read it very quickly. I don't care about information that's too old, so only give me stuff since June, and I need it to be simple," right? So give it, even more context so that you can have a successful result. So if we break down that particular prompt into the ingredients that Microsoft has talked about in the past months, we have 4 main ingredients here. You've got the goal, what you want Copilot to do. You've got why you want Copilot to do this thing, so what the context is. And then where should Copilot look or where should it pull from? I want you to focus on emails and chats just since June. I don't need everything in the history of my career. I just need June. And then how do you want it delivered? That's the expectation that you're setting. So I hope that kind of sets the stage for crafting better prompts and why it's important to do some kind of prompt engineering. So Andy, I think the next thing to talk about is how do we get inspiration? Where can we find some of these good prompts that can kind of give you like a jump start in crafting good prompts that you want to organize later?
Yeah, that's a good question. And the first place that I would recommend is actually in product. Depending, like, for example, if we're using Copilot Microsoft 365 in product, there are typically some examples or there's some basic prompts to get you started, and you'll find those like right in product. So, like, I'll bring my screen up, and then we can kind of take a look at that. So, 1 second, let me just grab the right window. All right, so all right, sharing my screen now, and I'm going to go into one of the most basic Copilot experiences that we have. And from Microsoft 365 Home, I'm going to look for Copilot along the left-hand navigation. Now, this brings me into Copilot for Microsoft 365. We'll circle back to Copilot and Copilot Pro in just a moment. But right away, starting here at just Microsoft 365 Copilot, there are a couple of examples right along the top. These are some good prompts to get started with, but they also imply what you can do. So, for example, a very basic one: how do I write a request for a proposal? That's going to be like just asking the LLM for a basic outline of how to like write a proposal. You could do maybe
Mhm.
a Microsoft Word template and get something similar, but with this one, it's going to be conversational. There's also help me prepare for a meeting. This one actually indicates that you can reference a meeting. So, like for example, if I were to select this one's going to open up and say, here's some of the meetings that you've scheduled recently. And it's going to recall information that's available to me as part of my Microsoft 365 account and is available through the Microsoft Graph and through the security and the permissions that I have. So, this one, I would call this one maybe a better prompt because I'm asking it to help me do something, but I'm giving it context. I'm grounding it in the conversation. Help me prepare for this meeting, and the content based off of like the meeting that I select is going to ground that even further and give me some better results. And then like maybe going into something like a little bit a best scenario. So we've done like a good. The meeting I think would be a better, and then like a best would maybe be this one right up here. What's new? What's new from, and it's allowing me to reference a person. And then from there, it's saying organized by emails, then chats, and then files. So I'm telling it specifically that I need to find the latest information, who I need to get that information from, and then prioritize and organize by these parameters. I'm giving it some more context. Like I'm
Mhm.
talking to John's 6 year old and I'm unloading the dishwasher. I think this would be an example of a better prompt. These are actually built right in to Copilot for Microsoft 365. But this is not the only place that you'll find and get some of this information. Say, for example, you were getting ready to draft a document. All right, so I go to my OneDrive, for instance. I want to create a new file. I'm going to go into Word. All right, so I'm drafting a new document with Word. As Word opens up, the Copilot option is going to show up here in the middle of the screen, and that's going to allow me to start working with Copilot and drafting Copilot right away. And they're even telling you in product, describe what you'd like to write, include notes or an outline, and the Copilot can generate a draft to get you started. They're telling you to give it some more context, to give it some more information to get started. They're also pointing out down here that you can reference your own content, and referencing your own content gives it some context. We call this like a one shot where you're giving it an example of something and then use that example either to add to the thing that you're creating or to create something new based off of that. But even when you go into the Copilot sidebar over here, you're going to see a couple of suggestions. So here it's saying ask a question. That's a very basic, very general prompt. But when you say ask a question, then it's going to prompt you to expand. What do you want to ask that about that particular document? Now, transitioning just a little bit further down that route, there's this book icon and it says view prompts when you hover over it. When you
Mhm.
bring this up, it's going to show you some additional prompts that you might be able to use against that app that you're working in or that app experience. But if you click here, it says view more prompts. This takes you to Copilot Lab. And Copilot Lab is Microsoft's resource for prompts that are good across most organizations and most business processes. Now, again, when I think about prompts, just like John, I think about a good, better, best scenario. These are good prompts to get you started. So Microsoft has tested these, they vetted these, they know they work in most Microsoft 365 environments for most business cases. So I can go in and say, explain this document in 3 sentences. That's a pretty good prompt to start with. Give me specific examples of on this document how I can prove it or improve it for, and then what scenario. I think that would be like a better prompt because then you're grounding it a little bit more in what you're looking for. But Copilot Labs is available in product, like we're seeing here in Copilot in Word. But you can also see all prompts in Copilot Lab because it's a standalone website that you can visit. So when you go to Copilot Lab, this is a place to really start learning and understanding some of the core prompts that you can work with. But then you really need to put a little bit of thought into how can I amend this to my business process? How can I amend this to the outcome that I want? This gets me started, then I can tweak it to get exactly what I want. So if you
Mhm.
haven't seen Copilot Labs, it has a number of different prompts that are basically apply to a specific app or a Copilot experience. So, for example, if I wanted to just narrow this down to Daryl's favorite, Microsoft Loop, I would be able to do that. And now it's going to give me a series of prompts that would work fairly well in a Loop workspace or in maybe a Loop page. If I wanted to maybe open this up and go to maybe Microsoft Teams, that would give me prompts that are a little bit more specific to application inside of Microsoft Teams. So I can quickly browse by the application that I want to work with here, but I can also maybe narrow it down by category. Maybe I want to catch up because I was away at the MVP summit last week and I want to use Teams to catch up on information. I could do that. Or maybe I want to narrow it down and perhaps use Outlook. Apparently, there's not one for catching up in Outlook. We'll show you an example of that in just a moment. But you can narrow it down by app and then by category to get back to a specific application inside of there and find a couple of different prompts that you might want to work with. Now, the other really cool thing about this is when you find one that you like, one of the things that you can actually do is you can bookmark that. And then you're basically saving that as a prompt. So you don't have to go through this process each and every time that you want to work with it. You can save it as a prompt and then go back to your save prompts area. And then you'll be able to find that one quickly the next time that you want to work. And going back into Word, for instance, I would be able to go and see maybe saved prompts that I've worked with previously in that particular Copilot in that app experience. But the thing about Copilot Labs that I like is that it's for the most part built in to the app that you're working with, and it gives you a starting point. And that's one of the things that I emphasize over and over about Copilot. It's great that I can talk to it just like I would talk to anybody. But if you don't know what's on the menu, how do you know what to order? And this kind of gets you some ideas and gives you some things to think about as you start that journey into prompting. So
Mhm.
those are just a couple of initial starting points for finding good prompts.
Yeah. The
What about
second
you, John?
one, yeah, the second one on the list here is the Microsoft Adoption Kit. So we're going to be coming back to Copilot Lab a lot more often. This is a great place to get and save prompts. For more on the concept of prompting, as well as just everything else Copilot related, there's adoption.microsoft.com/Copilot. I just put that in the chat. There is a section on this website called Build Your Prompt Skills that will take you a little bit down the page to where you can learn more about the ingredients of a prompt and do's and don'ts. So these are general tips to get into the world of prompt engineering. And it talks about that, that example that I gave of the goal, the context, the source, the expectations. And it's kind of step by step how to get good at prompting. So I would definitely read through these infographic flyers. The other one is do's and don'ts, like be specific, don't be vague, keep it conversational, don't request something inappropriate, stuff like that. So those are good handouts to take with you. And that one's a pretty short one. The third one that I want to share is let me get the link for it here, but that is the tech community. So the tech community for Copilot is another great resource that you can get. So resource number 3, tech community. And then I'm going to put that up on screen for you guys as well. There we go. So there are different hubs and places where you can discuss prompt engineering and learn more about the concept of prompt engineering. And there's people out here who are sharing prompts that they discover and like good things that they're unfolding and like, hey, this is really helpful for me in my job. Other people are adding to it. So there's a wealth of information as well as like what's coming and what's exciting and new in the product itself. So I would recommend joining the tech community to start your journey in getting better at prompt engineering. And then the fourth one that we've got is going to be kind of a flurry of resources. And this is a lot of, influencers and MVPs, Microsoft employees, people like that. And there was a great, comment here from Fairy Geek Mother that is, I see a lot of prompt suggestions appear on LinkedIn, right? And that is another thing that we want to highlight is all of the different influencers. And Andy, we've got a list in our note page of like different people that we want to highlight on LinkedIn and around the internet that are, either inspirational to us or they're friends of ours, things like that. The first one that I want to bring up is I think I pronounce it right, Jack Robotham. So this guy is a Microsoft employee. He's the marketing lead of Copilot Studio, and he's putting out tons of information about prompting and especially about like Microsoft Designer and a lot of the constructs of Microsoft Copilot. So he's one that I recommend following. Some of his more popular things, like these ones about Designer, he always puts in the link to the prompt that he used, so you can actually open the link in Designer and it will have his prompt listed. So that's a way that he shares prompts, and that's really a definitely good option to have. There is Jack's one. Do you want to talk about Lisa next?
Yeah, do you want to
We'll kind of
just
go back
bring
and
up
forth.
either her YouTube or her
Yep.
LinkedIn?
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
So while you're bringing that up, I really like Jack's designer stuff. The avatar, that one went
Hmm.
viral. That was really cool. So another one, community contributor, Lisa Crosby. Lisa does a lot with the Power Platform. She's got a great YouTube channel. She just crossed 50,000 subscribers. She's got a
Hmm.
great LinkedIn profile as well. I was about to call it a channel, but follow Lisa because she gives great tips and tricks, and she's kind of covering it from a couple of different angles. She's covering Copilot from kind of the Copilot for the general public and general availability. She's also covering it from the Power Platform side, so you'll see some like Copilot in like Power BI or Power Apps over on Lisa's channel, but she's
Hmm.
very consistent. I think it's like a video a week coming out, tons and tons of content, and she's got a
Yep.
ton of subscribers, and her work is really, really good. So big shout out to Lisa and the work that she's doing out there. Check out her channel and
Yeah.
her LinkedIn for some
She's been
Copilot prompting tips.
she's been really taking off lately. She just hit 50,000 subscribers. And she's got a playlist of Microsoft Copilot specific
Yeah.
videos. There's 23 videos in there already. So that's another one that we want to point people to for sure. Now, another one is Daniel Anderson. He has Copilot Studio, which I'll bring that up on screen as well. This is a LinkedIn page that he started a little while ago that is sharing a lot of information. And you've worked with Daniel recently, right? You
Yep.
were on his podcast.
Yep, I was on the podcast and I've
Hmm.
contributed to some of the Copilot Studio prompts of the week. Daniel does a really good job of getting this information out there, being consistent and republishing it. Had a great conversation with him on the podcast. That's available here from LinkedIn. I believe you can also find it on his YouTube channel. But the
Hmm.
Copilot Studio is also a newsletter that he has. So if you sign up for that, you get access to the podcast recording a little before it goes or before it's generally published. And then the newsletter brings you some great information right to your inbox each and every week. But I have been on the podcast and contributed a couple of prompts of the week out there. One of them is still going, still getting a lot of reactions for that. That's really cool. I really
Nice.
enjoyed sharing that particular prompt of the week, and I'll make sure to bring that up on the screen in just a little bit.
Cool. Yeah. So definitely go follow that page. Speaking of podcasts, another one is our friends Kevin and Zoe have the Copilot connection. So this is another podcast format that they also have a YouTube channel that we'll share as well. So you can find them on Apple Podcasts, also YouTube, Spotify, all the different places. And they've got 11 episodes so far, specifically on Copilot, and they share a lot of like prompting concepts and good ways to really get deeper into prompt engineering and really make it more like real world applicable. So I would highly recommend checking out the Copilot Connection podcast as well. Let me share the YouTube channel as well. So there's their YouTube channel. I will put that in the chat also. And that's how I follow them, as I subscribe to their YouTube channel. So go give them a subscription. They're up to like over 100 people now. So that's really good. And then last but not least, is a little bit of, I guess, self promoting, but Andy has been doing, I'll speak for Andy, so it's not entirely self promotion, but Andy, if you find him, William Honeycutt, I'll put his QR code up here as well. He is sharing recently a lot of carousels is what they're called, right? So these carousels, if you go and you're not already connected to Andy, you can connect with him. And this is a pretty new format that I haven't really, looked at a whole lot myself, but you've been doing a lot with it recently, right?
Yeah, so scroll down into the post area there,
Yeah.
and then I've got a couple from the last few weeks. There we go.
Yeah. Here we go. So these are really cool format because it's basically pages that you can scroll through, kind of like how Instagram has like carousels that you can kind of like go through images in a theme. And he's been putting these together to talk about a concept with Copilot and really, for lack of a better word, deep dive on something particular. Like this one is about the adoption journey and that kind of hype cycle that people go through where, this is what you can expect when you get into Copilot for the first time. And I would recommend following Andy, of course, so that you can consume these awesome carousels that he's been sharing on his LinkedIn. So there's another one right there.
Well, I
Any
certainly
other ones you want to
appreciate
mention?
the shout out there, and
Yeah.
just want to point out there's so many great content creators out there that are doing this work and putting it out. We don't mean to not promote someone out there. It's just these are some
Mhm.
of friends and colleagues that we follow and engage with fairly regularly, and they're doing some great work around Copilot. So we wanted to make sure we gave a shout out to that. One that I want to step back to for just a moment, if we could, John.
Mhm.
And it's the work that Microsoft is actually doing
Yeah.
and bringing forth. So I want to make sure that we just really emphasize the work that Caruana Gitamo and her team over at Microsoft is actually working on and publishing for us. So there's the basically the Copilot Success Center. You can, and we'll put a link to this in the chat window here, but it's adoption.microsoft.com for Copilot. And the
Mhm.
content that they're putting out was recently refreshed. So they went back and did a complete rewrite of a lot of this content. But this is a great starting point. You can prepare for Copilot, learn how it works. There's links to actually join in the Copilot community that's there. The success kit itself has been updated. There's a ton of resources in there. There's so much to choose from and kind of work through. But you can also go and you can break it down by business unit and scenarios. So maybe you're looking for user enablement in the onboarding stage. There's some specific things that you can point users to, like Copilot Lab, for instance.
Mhm.
There's some handouts to help you learn about the do's and don'ts of prompts and some of the ingredients, like John was showing just a little while. But there's a couple of things specifically in here that I just want to drill down into just a little bit before we move on, because these are great resources. And Microsoft's working with their partners and with their customers to create this content. And so it's really high value. As I mentioned, the success kit has been updated. You can download the entire success kit, and you're going to find a ton of resources in there. There's a couple of different guides, like a user enablement guide, a technical readiness guide. There are handouts like the top 10 prompts to try. handout. There's the user onboarding kit. And some of these are going to be in like a PDF format. Some of these are going to be in like a PowerPoint format as a takeaway that you can kind of amend for your purposes as you're kind of rolling this out in your organization. But one that I really like that they've done is the scenario library. And this one, I
Yeah.
think, allows you to kind of focus in on a certain role, a role that is generally applicable across most business units. And within there, you can use this to see some different ways that you can use Copilot, not only prompting against Copilot asking questions, but some ways that you can use it. Like, for example, scenarios for an IT teammate, creating a project plan, documenting and communicating best practices, procuring a new IT solution. And so there's a few different scenario based uh, guides that they've created that can help you to get started and learn how you can potentially apply this to your organization. And I know one of the things John and I are really working on is trying to measure ROI. How is Copilot
Hmm.
um, giving us a return on our investment? Is it giving us time back? Is it increasing productivity? Is it helping users to reach their goals and to do so with maybe a little less effort? And some of this information that Microsoft is creating is helping us to define some of the measurables that we're working with as we deploy copilots across various organizations. So I just wanted to point out that there were some things updated as part of the Copilot Success Kit and the scenarios. And this stuff is hot off the press in the last couple of weeks. So if you haven't seen it, definitely check
Yeah.
it out. It's worth your time.
Yeah,
So
those
hats
like
off
day
to
in the
Carolina
life.
and team for all the hard work that they're doing there, and giving this information to all of us for free.
Yeah, especially those day in the life user scenarios are super helpful because it really kind of there's all these like lofty ideas of like Copilot's going to change the world and all this stuff, but like bringing it down to the individual, what do I do with it type of thing to start out. It's overwhelming to like have these crazy aspirations. So what I like to do is map out what is your day in the life and how can we just sprinkle Copilot throughout your typical day, right? So this really kind of inspires you like for looking at and mapping out those things. Like just start out light. You don't have to like transform your whole life right away, right? So I think that's really good. So we talked about prompt engineering basics and where to beg, borrow, and steal prompts from, right? Now, let's shift gears a little bit to talk about developing and saving your own prompts, right? So, the idea of I'm going to sit down, I'm going to dedicate time to getting better at prompting, and I'm going to start out by, like copying from other people and learning what they do. But then I want to start developing my own prompts that are worthy of organizing. Andy, your favorite tool lately has been the Copilot notebook for that,
Mhm.
right? Do
Yep.
you want to quickly go through kind of like the idea of like getting from an okay prompt to a great prompt
Yeah.
using the notebook?
Sure. So
Cool.
this is something that just about anybody can do. So I'm going to go to copilot.microsoft.com.
Hmm.
Get there eventually. There we go. All right. So I'm at copilot.microsoft.com. Now it's telling me that I'm logged into my work up here in the top. I'm going to toggle
Hmm.
over to the web. When I go into the web experience, I'm still connected with my work account, but my conversation's protected. It's not going to save anything that I talk about here. It's not going to train the model. I can't get back to any previous conversations. But as part of this, I can click Notebook up here in the top, and this is part of the Copilot experience, formerly known as Bing Chat Enterprise. It's now just called Microsoft Copilot. And you can do this in an enterprise environment, but you can also just do this as general public. If you were to open up just your web browser, not logged in with a school or work account, you could just go to copilot.microsoft.com and you should see the notebook option there as well. And you can take advantage of that. And the notebook does a couple of things. Now, we briefly covered this previously. And one of the things that it does is, let me just go back real quick. When you start prompting initially, you've got about 2,000 characters that you can use as part of the prompt that, or the ask that you have of Copilot right down here. When you toggle over into the notebook scenario, that actually increases to 18,000 characters. So significantly more characters that you're going to be able to work with. But the cool thing about this is that you're going to be able to go through a prompting scenario. So you could start with a basic prompt, and then you could work your way up into something better. So we did some examples of this in the previous deep dive that we had. Let me see if I don't have that one pulled up, but we did some examples of it. And so the thing about this is you can use it to fine tune your prompt. You can start with something basic, and then you can drill down a little bit more. So, um, tell me about Copilot for M365. Very basic, very general question. It's going to go and it's going to start responding and give me that information. But keep in mind, I've got 18,000 characters over here that I could use. I could paste in a pretty large document and
Yeah.
get some
You're
feedback
only using
around that.
30 right now.
Yeah.
And you see that like what's coming back here is just kind of a bunch of text, right? It's just a one-on-one conversation. It's informing Andy individually, right? So
Hmm.
a way that he could make this a little bit better is he could add some context around tell me about Copilot for M365. Write it as a, you know, Civil War style letter to, a soldier's wife or something ridiculous like that, right? He can make it more fun by like changing the format in it, or like give it to me as a poem or something like that. Something I use a lot is write it like a blog post so that it's kind of got like a hook. It makes it more interesting to read. I like learning about something in like blog post format, for example. So that would be one way you kind of take something good and you make it better, right? And then making something great would be putting some constraints on it and some more expectations on it. Like, hey, write this as a blog post, but focus on, just the, modern collaboration apps like Microsoft Teams and Loop and Whiteboard, right? And then focus on the more traditional apps like Word, Excel, PowerPoint. You could kind of like split the topic and get more information about different areas of Copilot, for example. So those are ways that you can kind of go back, see on the right, the right hand side, what comes out of Copilot, and like, that's not really what I want. Go tweak it and see how it changes. It's almost like, do you remember W3 schools where they've got like that CSS builder and you're like learning HTML for the first time, and it's like it shows you the example and you can play over on the left-hand side, and it's like make the text green and it becomes green, make it bold. Like that's essentially what you're doing is you're going back and you're making the prompt better, you're stripping things out, you're kind of going back and forth and you're seeing the result on the other side. So that popped in my mind just now. Like think of it kind of like when you were learning HTML through like W3 schools.
Exactly. And as we're doing this, one thing we should point out, we're iterating. And that's one of the things that I really like about Copilot. And so what I can kind of iterate quickly through a single prompt here and kind of get a one shot out of this. But um, to John's point, this is very much like W3 schools. You get a real time output as you're doing it. You can see that the what it's going to essentially generate from that, and then you can use that to kind of figure out, okay, optimize a single prompt. And when we talk about prompting, there's a skill that you'll develop over time. There's a zero shot, there's a one shot, and there's a few shot. And a zero shot is just a basic question. You're not giving it any context. You're not giving it any grounding. You're not giving it any outcome. You're just saying, what is this? You're asking a question, summarize
Mhm.
this. That's essentially a zero shot. A one shot is you're giving it an example. You're telling it, I want you to do this thing, and this is kind of how I want it to come out. A few shot is you give it a few different uh, examples, and then it's able to output based off of that. And that's the kind of what we're doing here is we're iterating through a good, better, best scenario. Each time we go back and rebuild the prompt, we're maybe adding a goal to it. We're adding some context to it. We're telling it the desired outcome. We're telling it what the audience that this particular prompt is going to apply to. And this helps us to create like a really good one-shot prompt that we can use that could be applicable in a couple of business cases. Now, in this specific example here, I've told it, tell me about Copilot for Microsoft 365, which apps are supported and what features. Then I told it, go ahead and organize it by app, include a description for each app. The audience is going to be an IT user for a small, and I didn't say business, but I think it was able to interpret that and look at the results. And if you're watching the video live, pause the video and jump back 30 seconds or a minute and look where we started and look at the outcome that we're actually getting out of this now. So this particular prompt is very much for a specific topic. Tell me about Copilot for Microsoft 365, which apps are supported. But now we've kind of got the core of a prompt. We could take this and say, tell me about an insert app, process, topic. And you could remove the specific, in this case, Copilot for M365, and replace that with another topic. And then
Mhm.
which apps, which features that could be for that particular topic. So we could make this reusable across some different business information or some different business processes. And we have an idea of what the outcome is going to look like. Now we've got um, kind of an idea of what this will uh, the format, the results are potentially going to be like. So now we can take this, maybe copy that, put it in our personal prompting notebook, and we could reuse it. So the notebook, really,
Mhm.
this is your playground. This is the Copilot playground. There's one in Chat GPT. There's a Chat GPT playground. It does kind of the same thing. They've taken that concept and applied it over here. And this is a great place to just explore different prompts and see what you can do with it and what the outcomes can potentially be.
Yeah, that's a really good point that you brought up too, is like think about reuse, right? As you start looking at Copilot Lab in particular, notice that they've got a bunch of placeholders in their prompts. Like, what's the latest with person? Give me details about file. And those are placeholders, so as you get a good prompt, you could start extracting out the specifics, replace them with placeholders like what he's got on screen right now, and now you're starting to build something that you could share with other people and all of that. So, um, Andy, you talked about like saving in your personal
Mhm.
prompt notebook. What do you use for saving prompts that you're like, I don't, if I went away from this page, it goes away. So you want to save that, right? Do you have a system for doing that yet? Because
So
I don't. I have to admit, like, I'm not saving my stuff, and I should be.
So I'm going to walk you through how it started and then kind of walk you to where I am today.
Okay.
So for me, this is where I started a lot of my prompt journey. This thing, ChatGPT, came on the scene in November of 2022. I think I heard about it in like December, started working with it from there. And if you go back through my chat history over here, it just goes on and on and on. And thankfully, it loads faster, search has gotten faster. But you see, I save a lot of my conversations and I go back and I revisit them
Mhm,
over and over and over again. That's kind of the starting point. That's
mhm,
where a lot of my prompts are saved. It's not exactly efficient. For one, there's not a search built into the web interface, but there is on the mobile app. So I could go on the mobile app with
mhm.
ChatGPT and I can search for a keyword or phrase, and like I can get back to something pretty quickly over there.
I
Uh,
wish we had folders. Like, I've tried some,
Folders,
like, Google Chrome plugins and stuff,
yeah, folders,
you know?
tagging, or search on the web for
Yeah.
ChatGPT would just be awesome. But like I find myself like going back and like revisiting information over here quite frequently. Like one that yeah, I've done used it as a demo a bunch of times. This is a basic explain this and then follow up. That's my preferred method, like, when I'm learning a prompt. So, like, I go through the iteration, I go through the conversation, and then I get to a point and I ask the bot, whether it's Copilot or ChatGPT. I ask it, what how could I prompt against this? How could I um, um, prompt against or make this conversation into a prompt to simplify this process. So like I'll have a conversation and then I'll ask it for give me an example of a prompt that I could reuse for this. That's kind of how
Mhm.
it started. Now, as we got Copilot, and I got into the EAP with my organization back in like August, September of last year. As we got into that, um, with Copilot for Microsoft 365, we were able to start saving our chats. We weren't able to in the very beginning. It came pretty quickly in the EAP. So this is a demo tenant that I'm in. I can go back and I can revisit a previous chat or a previous conversation. So like I can get back to maybe the prompt that I worked with. Again, there's not a search built in. It does save my prompts. It's not exactly the most efficient way to get back to what I want, but at least my prompt history is saved. And so I can go back and revisit the conversation if I can remember a keyword or a phrase that's actually like built into the title of it. And sometimes I have to like go back and revisit these a few times. So I can do that
Right.
over here as part of Copilot for M365, or if I'm just doing Copilot with my personal account, I get that history as well, and I can go back and I can revisit it. The next step, though, is once you start kind of figuring out some of the ins and outs, the next thing you need to do is like you start capturing those. So like I would go back and say, hey, this was a pretty good prompt. I like the way that this thing like turned out here. I don't want to have to search it, so I need to find a way to save it. And that's kind
Mhm.
of where we start getting into organizing prompts. How do we go from here to kind of the next step? And so we mentioned Copilot Labs. Copilot Labs is great. It's kind of a basic getting started prompts to try. My feedback to Microsoft would be on this, since I'm logged in and you know who I am, maybe I could save some of my own prompts here. Maybe I could save some prompts that I want to share with some other
Mhm.
teammates in the organization. For me, if we could find a happy medium between Copilot Lab and the notebook that's built into Copilot over here, I think that would be really cool. Or if Notebook would maybe have like a chat history where I could save prompts off to the side and kind of revisit iterating against that, I think that would be really cool. But I've got this prompt that I've done, and now I want to save it. So I really the shortcomings I think with Copilot Lab are you've got to be like logged in to get to it. We
Mhm.
can't publish to it. We're basically there to consume. We can bookmark, which is great, but like I want to be able to do a little more. So maybe in the future, Microsoft will do that. And I think a couple of additional shortcomings we'd like to see is maybe a few more filters, filtering by role, service line, department, business application. I think that would be huge for Copilot Labs. Another thing that I think would be huge for Copilot Labs is the a rating or an upvoting process. I kind of think about like the Power
Yep.
Platform, Power Apps, and Power Automate. When you look at a template, tells you like who published it, the number of times that it's potentially been used. I think that's a great scenario. But when I think about rating and upvoting, I think about gamification. And I like the gamification process. Who can create the best prompt? Who can create the most popular prompt in the organization? That gets people to share, and anything we can do to get people to share to kind of help other people, I think would be huge. So I'd really like to see um, some um, updates to maybe Copilot Lab to increase some of the rating, the upvoting, most popular, highlighted, rated filters, and the gamification process of that.
Mhm.
But outside of Copilot Lab, what are some things that we can do to organize and work with our prompts? So, as our friend of the show says, saving to a OneNote notebook because of the built in search
Yeah.
capability. That is one of the tools that I've explored. I know if we go back, I'm gonna go way back, and I'm gonna grab this one. Our buddy Daryl is gonna be a huge advocate for Microsoft Loop. Daryl,
Yep.
don't worry, I got something coming up for you. But I'm thinking about like, I'm already in the Microsoft ecosystem. What tools do I have at my disposal? And then I think about the audience. Is it me? Is it we? And in this particular scenario, let's think about a little bit of me and a lot of we. The two main things that jump out at me are Microsoft List and Microsoft Loop. I think
Yep.
those are the two that are going to help to bridge both of those scenarios. We could use a OneNote notebook, but I think that's going to add a step or two to the process. I think that's good for personal productivity. I think that's good for my like maybe notes around a prompt that I've used and some of the outcomes and maybe links to where I've actually used that. I think that's great. But in a sharing scenario where I've used this prompt, it worked really well, and I want to make it available to my colleagues, I think List and Loop are going to be the two tools that I would recommend for users and to try to drive users to. So with
Yeah.
that, John, do you want to do a little bit on Microsoft List?
Yeah. So I'm a big fan of the list idea for organizing our prompts. So as we get into this kind of second phase of like starting to save off your prompts, starting to organize them in some way, getting back to them is important. And like was mentioned here in the comments, OneNote is great for that because of the search. We also have the search capability in lists. And what I like about lists, I'm just kind of a database minded type of guy. So I like the idea of like each one of these is an object and that object has attributes, right? So I'm kind of building like an index, if you will, of prompts. And this is what we put together based off of the feedback from our users in our own early access program. So when we were very early on, we had maybe 50 people. They talked about like it'd be nice to have like a share a prompt channel or something like that. So I had put together this prompt library and I've like moved this over to my MVP tenant now so I can demo it. But essentially, I was thinking in terms of like, how can I get like almost like a form to fill out or something like that so that I could take advantage of the search capabilities in lists, but also the filtering and organizing type of capabilities. So, what I did for a very basic list here is I've got what is the prompt? What's the description of the prompt? Like, why is it good? What's it good for? Those types of things. And then I've just got some tags for it. And what that is helpful for is doing some organization, right? I don't necessarily want to have like a whole bunch of like different columns for filters. I kind of like the idea of keeping things flat and just doing like tags and that's it. So I've got like things tagged for like what is the application. I've also got thing like a tag for like meetings, right? And what's nice is if you tag it, you can filter by it. So I can be like, all right, I'm in a meeting. I want to just see the meeting ideas. So there's all of the prompts from my prompt library that I could kind of pull out of my toolbox to use during a meeting, right? So those are some ideas as far as tagging. And what I like also about the list concept is you can have something called a rating column. So it's a little bit down here. It's the average rating, and that gives you like a 1 to 5 star or a 0 to 5 star rating. But you can change that instead of a rating, you can change it to a like column. And that gives you basically the concept of an upvote by clicking on the heart. You're basically saying, I like this, and that adds a little bit of community to the prompt library for your organization because you can then sort by, the number of likes and have your most popular ones up there at the top like that. So I like kind of infusing a little bit of community to it. I can store the list in a SharePoint site, and that SharePoint site could be the SharePoint site that is attached to your either Microsoft Team or Viva Engage community. That is your Copilot community. We talked at Teams Nation a couple weeks ago about building your M365 Copilot community and how important that is. An aspect of that community is a engaging and collaborative prompt library so that you can, build a knowledge base. And I'm a big advocate personally just of doing that in Microsoft lists. Now, the you're leaning a little bit more into like the pure collaboration world with Loop and building a Loop workspace. So I'm interested to see what you've kind of mocked up with Loop components, because what I've done is like, here's a list. There's a little bit of like, I'm thinking of governance, right? I could make it so that I could have custom views. I could not allow people to submit it to a list. I could do like an approval workflow with Power Automate and kind of, like not just like open it up to everybody. But if you want to be more organic about it, you can certainly use Microsoft Loop. And before I kick it over to you, Andy, for workspaces, one thing I do want to point out for those who are kind of new to Microsoft Loop is eventually, as you mature, you may have a workspace that is your prompt library. That's what Andy's going to show. But along what was mentioned here with OneNote, if you go to loop.microsoft, you have the idea area. That could be your personal prompt library. So you may start out with Loop and just capturing things to get them out of your brain and put them somewhere. You could basically kind of graduate this into a workspace and create your organizational workspace off of your own idea. So I kind of wanted to mention that as well, because I think the ideas area of Loop is a little bit overlooked sometimes, that like that's kind of your personal notebook. So are you ready to take us through what you've mocked up in Loop workspaces?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, awesome.
So, um, just basically like looking at the workspaces, I've just created one specifically for this demo, in this demo environment. But we dive into it. I've got a section here for prompts, and then I got a section for resources. What I like about the workspace is that I can do the list based form factor, like John was just talking about,
Mhm.
but I can also append that with additional information, resources, and other content, and create essentially one stop shop. But then circling back to the ideas, I could take this thing that we've created right over here, turn it into a component, and then share it with other people in a number of different ways. Send it to them through email, as part of a Teams chat. Send it to them in a Word document. Give it to them so they can put it in their OneNote notebook, and so forth. So there's a number of different places that I can reuse this. But I've essentially done the same thing you've done. I've created a table, a list inside of my page. For me, I'm
Mhm.
capturing the prompt that was used, organizing it by app. So I'm just tagging it here, by the app that it was used. I'm capturing, in this case, the contributor. Sometimes knowing who contributed can add weight to it. If we wanted to, we could capture the number of uses. Haven't figured out really a way to automate this one yet. I know we just got some automation with Loop recently. So maybe there's like a Power Automate that we could run on that. But I did do a rating inside of here, so people can come in and they can rate it as it's used. So as I share the workspace or the component, people could rate this, and
Mhm.
we could use that as a way to kind of filter.
That's
Um,
called a voting column, right?
yeah, this is a voting
Okay.
column that I
Yeah.
applied here. Yep. And I'm just using this to capture some of the prompts that I've used, and it makes it easy for me to go through if I need to. Um, we can kind of drill down to certain prompts, insert additional columns, sort ascending or descending. But at a very quick glance, I can see, oh, this is going to apply to Microsoft Word. Here's the prompt that was used, copy and paste, and then you can move on. The cool thing is though, if you turn it into a component, you can put it in the document that maybe you're drafting, refer to it as you're in the process of drafting the document, and make
Mhm.
it available that way. So just grabbed a simple table here inside of Loop, and I've got that going. Another thing I think is really cool, down at the bottom, it's giving me some auto totals. So like it's telling me
Mm.
there's a couple, two for Word, one for PowerPoint, one for Excel, one for Outlook. And I'm not having to create the totals in order to do that like I would have to in a list. It's only a couple of extra steps in the list, but I like that that's there by default. It's also telling me who the top contributor is right down here at the bottom. But
I
not only
like
do I
that. That's
get,
a way to gamify it a little bit, right? You could
yep,
have who the top contributors are. So, because the next thing we're going to talk about, or one of the things in the future, is what's been going around LinkedIn for the past day, and there was like a leaderboard that was built into that.
mhm.
So this kind of gives you a little bit of that, of who are your top contributors, so you could start maybe identifying some champions out of your group.
Here's the I really like that piece of it, the gamification of it. But here's the
Hmm.
thing that I think really starts to separate Loop from just a standalone list. I could use the standalone list as is. I could tab it into a team. I could put it on a SharePoint page. And if I did that, I
Hmm.
could add other content to it. But here on the Loop page, I can go right away and start adding additional content. So I can
Yeah.
add additional references. I can pull content from other pages. Maybe I can use Copilot and have it draft a page summary and tell me which prompts are the most popular and what application is the most popular, and do some of that.
Yeah.
But the main thing is all of these other Loop tools are now available as part of this page in this Loop workspace, and so I can go beyond just the table to maybe an explanation, maybe providing a link, maybe referencing a video, and I can
You can
start to
embed
really
that
branch
do's
out
and
and show more.
don'ts. Yeah, embed the image of that do's and don'ts from
Mhm.
the prompt engineering from the adoption kit. I like that. It's more flexible that way because of the
Yeah.
different types of media you can put in there.
But if I need to, I can convert it into a component. And now this becomes reusable in Teams, in
Hmm.
Outlook, in Whiteboard, in Microsoft Word. So now I can take this and I can go into other places. So in this particular example, I'm putting my prompts by all in one table and then tagging it with an app. But what if I created a separate table that's just for Word? I could share just that table for word-based prompts with someone, and then they can consume it wherever they need. For example, if we want to put it in OneNote, bam, there you go. There's a set of prompts that are specific to OneNote. It's a OneNote or specific table, and now you've got that information, and you can go from there.
Hmm. Interesting. So I do like that. I'm curious what you would use the rest of the workspace for, right? Because you could have like the prompt library, it's a page, but yeah, maybe you would not have the workspace be the prompt library, but have the workspace be like level up your Copilot skills or
Yeah.
something, and the prompt library is like a component of that, and then the other resources, like here's the classes we have, you embed some like some stream or some YouTube videos in there. Here's the like important links, you embed like the adoption kit, the tech community.
So I
So
really
maybe
like
you make it
the
an adoption workspace.
I really like where you're going with that. And I think it could be a really cool use case to have maybe a workspace that's an introduction to Copilot, an
Mhm.
introduction to basic prompts, an explanation of more advanced prompts, and then a prompt library where you can come back and revisit. And you're turning that information into something that's reusable, kind of like a garden. And as you feed it, it's going to grow and more people can
Mhm.
onboard to it down the road. And because it's loop, it's reusable. So we can bring it into other areas where users might be working. And that kind of touches base with like there's a few different methodologies when it comes to like note taking and personal knowledge management, team based knowledge management.
Mhm.
And one of those is a garden, and a garden is basically it's not something that's ever really finalized or complete. You go back and you nurture it, you water it, you plant new seeds in it, and then it grows into something else. And I think Loop really has the ability to do that. I love lists. I think lists are great, and there's a certain use case for it. But in this particular situation, I like the loop aspect to it, because I can bring in other information, and I think this is a good time to kind of talk about some of that information. We'll circle back to the GitHub prompt library in a minute, but
Okay.
in my notebook, I've added in a section for resources. So sharing resources is really important, but sometimes in Microsoft Teams, if you've got a community where you're sharing information, it can get lost in the various channels and conversations. It's kind of hard to who said this and where did they say it? Was it in a private chat, one on one, or small group? Was it in a channel? Where was that information? Was it tabbed in? It can be hard. So in this case, I've got prompts right over here as a table, a component, and then I've got a list of resources. There's the link to the Microsoft Adoption Success Kit. There's a link to the blog for what's new in Copilot, and I'm bringing that to whoever the audience of this particular notebook is. Um, and then some other information that can be really helpful. Since we're talking about prompting, and we're talking about organizing promptings, one of my biggest resources is the Microsoft service descriptions. This tells you specifically what you can expect each of the Copilot experiences to do. And that's one of the adoption hurdles is users hear the magic of Copilot. It can do anything. It's AI, it's super powered. But
Mhm.
in the Copilot world, there are guardrails. There are some things that it can do, and then there's some things it can't necessarily do. And having the service descriptions, but also having the service overview for each of the different apps and experiences can really help you to help users understand how to temper their expectations and work within it. So I provide that as a resource in our communities when our users are onboarding. I can now bring that right into um, this workspace, this Loop workspace, and I can make it familiar to those users and make it available to them. If you haven't seen the descriptions, we'll make sure to post this into the chat, the various chat windows. But this is what like feature availability for Copilot. I always share this with anybody that's kind of onboarding, but also share this in like workshops and things that I deliver because this helps the users to really understand what to expect out of Copilot. And we're going to come back to this in just a second, but I just want to make sure I get that out into the chat window for anybody who might be interested in that. So give me 1 second to grab that link.
Mhm. So yeah, I'm curious. I put a prompt on the screen for you guys who are watching. Like, now that you've kind of seen examples of both, like what are you leaning toward, lists or Loop? Right. I've got two people have posted there. They're leaning more towards the list side. One, Denise had an interesting idea. She said um, that her reasoning around lists is the attachment idea. Like maybe you want to attach a very, very long prompt, so you could be able to do that, or you could attach examples or something like that. That's kind of an interesting idea I hadn't thought about on the list side of things. Fairy Geek Mother says that she's, more familiar with lists over Loop. I think for me, I'm looking at like so I'm going to be doing like a little bit of a prompt library for an event that I have coming up in San Francisco in like 4 weeks. I think I might try the Loop idea because we're gonna collaboratively build a prompt library just for that particular use case. I've done lists in the past. I think I'm gonna try Loop and see how that works with my cohort of people that I'm working with on that. But yeah, that's an interesting idea. It looks like you can do pretty much what I was doing, at least, where it was like you got upvoting, you got the prompt, you got the tagging, stuff like that.
Mhm.
I think that's pretty cool. But yeah, I'm curious if anybody else like has like what Denise mentioned about like attachments or something. Like, is there some special thing that we missed about either one of those tools? So uh-oh, we're hearing that the feature availability link goes to a 404. Um,
Hmm.
Interesting.
Oops. Well,
Let me see. Can you put that in the chat and I'll paste it in for YouTube's sake? I see that
yeah.
you posted it on LinkedIn. Um, See, this is another one. Is like we're on multiple places, right? So it's like we got to get the link to like all the different chats that are going on.
Yeah. See
Let
if that
me,
works.
yeah, let's paste it in there. Okay, that worked for me. See if that works for you guys too. Hopefully. Um,
It looks like the
yeah.
same
Then
link to me. Who
here's
knows?
the second one. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, we're
All right.
spamming it with links anyway, whether
Yeah.
you're on YouTube or on LinkedIn. Um, cool. So that covers those two things. Is there anything else you want to talk about before we take a look at the newest hot off the presses idea that we saw on LinkedIn yesterday? Okay, she said it works now.
All right, awesome. I think that covers most of what we wanted to capture here. So let's show the hot off the press item that
Okay.
we wanted that we mentioned. And keep in mind, like, none of this is like definitive. Like, we're showing you what the options are, the things that are out there, just to give you some ideas. But one that came up recently from Eric Olson, who is a Microsoft
Yeah, there we go.
teammate. He posted this on his LinkedIn recently. I think it was like yesterday or the day before, and I shared it with John because this was really timely. We were just talking about this as
Mhm.
we were putting together our lists and putting together our loop tables, our loop workspaces. This popped up, and I was like, "Oh man, this is like right in line with what we were talking about." Um, he has released an app called Prompt Buddy, and it's actually built on top of Power Apps. Behind the scenes, I imagine there's some lists that power it. But with Prompt Buddy, you can organize by app. You can view your top contributors. You can view your top prompts, and you can view the new prompts, and you can see that there's a voting context that's built into it. They've done a great job of the UI. I think it looks awesome, and
Yeah.
this is a way to gamify the process that kind of does some of the same things that we were talking about with the two components that we created. This is currently available on GitHub, so you can go out there and you can grab Prompt Buddy from GitHub. But it's a
Mhm.
Microsoft Teams based Power App, and it uses Dataverse. So you can create this. Now, full disclosure, I haven't had a time or time to install it and put it through the paces myself. On the surface, it looks really awesome. I just need to install it and see what the installation process looks like, and then use it a couple times to see what that's going to look like. Uh, but we thought this was really cool. We just wanted to share it, and maybe if we have some time to go through it in a future deep dive, we'll take a look at it more in depth.
Yeah, I'm curious if you guys are interested in seeing a little bit more about Prompt Buddy, or if you'd like us to try in a deep dive, like installing it and just see what happens. Because we just learned about it, like I said, yesterday, and it's really topical for what we're talking about today. But I think it's really interesting. I just put the link to it in the chat for you guys. Um, so yeah, just looking at the GitHub here, I just kind of want to scroll through and look at some of the installation. So it looks like it's best to do it as they recommend installing it as an app in Teams as an unmanaged solution. So like do it as like a one of those side loaded apps inside of Microsoft Teams. It could take like a couple of minutes to do that. Says if this is the first Power App, so it is going to create a Dataverse instance. So, I mean, I'm terrible at the Power Platform, Andy, but that would tell me that it's not or it's not SharePoint list behind the scenes, right? It's going to do a proper Dataverse
Yeah,
like database, right?
yeah, it's Dataverse
So,
behind the scenes.
okay. So, I mean, that's good. That's probably like more scalable and more supportable, for like a somewhat, decent size enterprise if you're doing that. But yeah, so that seems like it's pretty easy. I'm gonna look at the installation demo because I just want to like see what he's going through here. So it's also Stuart, Ethan and Stuart together from Microsoft have put this together and been talking about it on their different
Eric and Stuart.
LinkedIn's. Oh, Eric and Stuart. Sorry, I thought Ethan. I don't know
Yeah.
why I messed that up. So yeah, he's essentially importing this. It's creating that Dataverse connection, and then he's going through. So he's got it imported into his apps in Power Apps, and I imagine then so it's going to set up the connections to Teams, and then they're going to publish that out to a Microsoft team. So if you're going to do it like in a Viva Engage community, I assume you would just do it from a Power App itself, like a standalone Power App, and then you could pin that as a resource in your Viva Engage community as well. So they're saving that, they're creating it so it's got a channel, and then I assume they're probably going to add a tab to, yeah, they got a tab for that particular Power App to load up. You select what team. Okay, so you can even like add like different teams. So I guess you could have like this department has a prompt buddy, this other one has a prompt buddy. Maybe you've got like a all company prompt buddy. That would be pretty interesting because then you could kind of like have one to rule them all. Like, in my enterprise where there's 400,000 people, we'll probably have like, 65,000 prompt buddies floating out there. It might be best to make one and then, like have them work through some, COE, like a center of excellence or something to maybe get another prompt buddy team created, you know? And then that way you could kind of expose that slice of it to some subgroup of users. But yeah, you can organize it so you can browse by app or by department or by persona too. So maybe you could load in, yeah, like if you're a consultant, if you're a nurse, if you're, uh, whatever, accountant or something like that.
It's
Yeah,
pretty
this looks
polished.
pretty sweet.
Yeah, we'll have to check that out.
Yeah, I want to deploy that and test it out. So I'm curious, anybody in the chat, have you guys tried this yet? I mean, it seems like it's brand spanking new, so I can't imagine a lot of people have, but
Or
I do
do
love
you
the
have an
icon too.
internal solution that you're currently working with? We would love to hear about it and what you're doing for some of uh,
Yeah.
your prompt sources. But I think that's a good segue to the next thing that we wanted to talk about was
Mhm.
so there's kind of, here's a couple of ideas for organizing prompts. We talked a little bit about creating good prompts and a little bit of the good, better, best scenario. But now, what about like sharing and publishing prompts? And what I really want to do is go
Yeah.
back to a comment that um, we had earlier with, let me just grab it real quick. Where is it? This is dead space in the
Yeah.
recording. I,
As we scroll forever in the
yeah.
chat.
Um,
Which one are you
the
talking about? Are
source
you
of your
talking about the
prompts
LinkedIn
really
one?
like where like so a lot of
Yeah,
prompt
yeah.
suggestions appear on LinkedIn. So do all LLMs understand prompts in the same way? And some specialized, or do some specialized information based on context? So just kind of bouncing back to that, I want to use that and talk about sharing and publishing prompts and some things that we've learned along the way with that. So for the most part, if you're working with Copilot, and chat gpt, a lot of the infrastructure behind the scenes is very much the same. The llm that's used by Microsoft is essentially the llm that's used by openai for chat gpt. The difference is with Microsoft Copilot, especially Copilot for m365, it uses the Microsoft graph, so it's grounded in your data. Now, I've seen just in the Microsoft space with Copilot for the public, Copilot Pro, and Copilot for Microsoft 365, the results are very, very similar as you go through the three. Demoed that in the last video that we did, where we talked about the Copilot Notebook, or we introduced that for the first time.
Mhm.
But I know there are some results that are going to be different in Copilot for Microsoft versus if I'm in Chat GPT. And honestly, I kind of bounce back and forth between the two just so I can get an idea of what does what and some different use cases. So the information is going to be similar, but it's also going to be different. And even if you were to go and use the same conversation over and over and over, you're going to get different results. Just like if you were to have a conversation with John and I today, and then have the same conversation tomorrow and the next day, it's going to be similar, but it's going to be a little bit different each and every time, and
Mhm.
that's kind of to be expected. But when we get into sharing prompts and publishing prompts, there's a bunch of different sources that you can collect those from. Social media is definitely one of those. You could follow the Copilot hashtag on LinkedIn, and you can get a lot of information. But you're also going to get a lot of garbage, and I'm not saying that in a negative light, but like there are people that are out there just publishing lists, the 20 greatest prompts ever. Or these prompts are going to save you 40 hours of work in your work week, and I just think that that stuff's not true. I think it's clickbait. Um, So you see something out there, maybe you try it. And if it works, you put it in your personal notebook and you work with it. So, what are the sources that we use? I know I save a lot from media. If I see something on LinkedIn that I like, I'll save it and try it. If I see something on Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it this week, I'll save it and I'll try it. Um, and when I save those things, I have a process that I use to save that content. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But what about you, John? Where are you getting some of the prompts that maybe outside of work that you're saving or viewing?
Um, Most of the prompts that I'm getting are from those LinkedIn sources that we talked about a little bit earlier. I usually just kind of see them on my feed. Another source of inspiration for me for finding prompts is YouTube channels. There's a few. I'll have to find what they are, but there's a couple channels where they talk about like the latest news in AI, and they kind of share prompts here and there. Lisa Crosby, she'll share prompts here and there as well, like in the course of her demos in her YouTube channel. So that's usually where I'm gathering those types of things. Um, you know, you were going to mention Reader, right? For like how the things come in. I'm doing similar to what you're doing. I think your readability or Readwise your Readwise reader is probably more mature than mine, but those articles that I get and like here's one source is the Work Lab. The Work Lab
Microsoft Work
subscription.
Lab.
There's a podcast, but there's also like the website and the blog. Um, as those come into my reader, I will see prompts that are inspirational in there and I'll highlight them in Reader and save them to the notebook. um, so I know whenever you were mentioning Reader, like before we got started, is
Hmm.
that kind of what you're doing as well?
Yeah.
Is saving them that way?
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the personal things we do, and then I think we'll kind of bookend it with some of the things that we do in the enterprise that we work with.
Okay.
So I'm going to bring my screen back up on the screen, and I did
Hmm.
post a link to the work lab in the chat window. But just heading back into some of the tools that I use. So I'm on a Mac, but this thing that I'm getting ready to show you, it works in a couple of, it works on both Mac and Windows. Um,
Hmm.
w- I use a lot of the Microsoft resources. I think some of the Microsoft resources are really, really good, and that's kind of the core place to start. Like, I joke in some of the training classes, have you read the manual? And most people have not read the manual. They're just like getting started. This is the manual. But sometimes the manual is in a couple of different places. You get a piece from here, you get a
Hmm.
piece from there, and then you literally piece it all together and you kind of figure out the narrative and you go from there. So one of the tools that I use for consolidating information is this tool called Reader. It's by a company called Readwise, so it's Readwise Reader. We'll put a link up in the chat window for it in a moment. But
Hmm.
it's a browser plugin. It's also a desktop app if you're on Mac, and I think they may have released it on Windows. I'm not 100%. I use a Mac, so I've got it there. But what Reader allows me to do is like, here's this article. It's cool, and I'm basically just going to clip it. And when I do that, I get this reader bar across the top. But here's what's really cool about Reader. Um, it gives me a reading view. So if I want to, I can open it in the reading view. And when you do that, it basically just gives you the content. So it's literally a reading app, kind of like Pocket or Instapaper. So it allows you to just focus in on the content and you can read through it. What's really cool though is you can move through it with just keyboard shortcuts. So you can just I'm using the up and down key on the keyboard right now. But when I get to something that's important, I hit H, and I've just made a highlight for that thing. Now, not only do I make a highlight for it, but I can also go in and I can give it my um, personal notes right here. This is what I think about this thing. So now I've got a
Hmm.
note, and now I've got something that's highlighted. But I can go back and revisit that. Another thing that's really cool about Reader is the ability to tag. So I can tag and I can say, "Oh, hey, this is really important," and it applies to something that I'm already tagging on called prompting. So now I've tagged it and given it a personal note, and I've highlighted it in the Reader platform, which is neat. But I can also go and view other actions. I can copy the text, I can share the text, but this is my favorite feature It's connected to this thing called Ghost Reader, and Ghost Reader is powered by ChatGPT. Ghost Reader
Mhm.
would allow you to do things like simplify it, translate it, TLDR, turn it into a haiku, make it into a flashcard. It uses generative AI to help you to do something with that thing that you've highlighted. I think that's just like super, super valuable. So as I'm like reading this thing, I'm just concentrating on the text. I just use my keyboard shortcuts to move through. This is important. Let me go ahead and highlight and tag that so I can make sure I can get back to this easy later on, and I can go through the whole document. If you use the mobile app for Reader, there's a text to speech. You can listen to it, read the article to you, which is great if I'm going to
I
go
do
on a
that a
walk.
lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Eh, I'll take a couple of documents, make sure they're queued up in Reader, and then I'll go on a walk, put my AirPods in, and then I'll just listen to the document, which is pretty awesome. But you might have noticed over here on the sidebar, it gives me a summary, and that summary was generated using ChatGPT. And so you can re-invoke Ghostwriter, and you can re-summarize it if you want. Additionally, it tells you what the source is, and so if you want, you can subscribe to that source.
Mhm.
That's like the Feedly app. So there's an app out there called Feedly that allows you to subscribe to RSS feeds, blogs, and YouTube channels. Reader has that built in. So now I've got basically Pocket and Instapaper and Feedly in a single app, and it's got generative AI tools built into it, and it works in my web browser, and it works on my mobile device. So I can consolidate some of my various applications into one application, which is cool. But we're not done
Yeah.
yet. At the bottom, it tells me some metadata, where it came from, when it was published, and you can edit that metadata. You can also go to the notebook, and you can see the highlights all in one place, including any
Including the
personal
tag.
notes that you've made with
Mhm.
that. And if you need to, you can export that. So you can export it to your clipboard and put it in Loop. You can export it to your clipboard and put it in Notion or put it in Obsidian. You can take it with you. You can even download the annotations if you need to, and they're in Markdown, and you can put that in your note-taking app of choice if you want a standalone note-taking app. My feedback to Reader and Readwise would be, can you make the notebook kind of its own standalone feature in your platform? I think that would be game changing. If I could have a full Readwise Reader notebook in addition to the Reader app and Readwise, it'd be amazing. And then lastly, if there are links in the document, it'll extract some of that, and it'll kind of point that out and bring it to you. Super, super powerful. But I'm going to exit out of the article, and now I'm in my inbox. So that's where I just pulled this thing in. I manually added it into my reader library. That's where I am. I'm in my reader library. These are things
Mhm.
that I've manually added. There's an app on your mobile device, and if like I'm on social media, I can just say send a reader, and it automatically creates an entry here in my library. I send stuff in here all the time. This is like my bookmarking tool, and it because I
Mhm.
can use it across a bunch of apps, it's one stop for me to go back and find it. When I go back and click on that article, it takes me right back to where I left off, but I can do some other things. So I have my tags over here. Well, I can create views around my tags, and I can say, well, filter, create a view, and find me everything that I've tagged with Microsoft Copilot. Or I could create a filter or a view and say, well, find me everything that maybe relates to like prompting, for instance. So like I would say like I'm looking for like maybe if I could type the prompting tag, and I could find everything that's maybe in my inbox that's related to that, and then I can save that essentially as a view, and then I can go back into that, and all that stuff's consolidated in one area, and you can tag with multiple items in there. So if you're familiar with SharePoint and columns and views, you're going to be right at home here. This is great.
Yeah.
Um, but not only can I create my own custom views, I can also create my feed. And my feed are the RSS feeds that I want to follow. The RSS feeds, the blogs, the websites, even podcasts and like YouTube. And so I can
Mhm.
pull all of that into one place. And so I can sort through here. And if I find something that I'm interested in, I can read the article, and if it's valuable content, I can say, well, maybe move that to my inbox and put it in my library. Maybe just archive it for later. Maybe tag it. Maybe add a document note and go invoke Ghost Reader and do those things against it. And I can go through my feed at my cadence whenever I want, and then save the things that are important to me back to my library, and they're organized in inbox later and archive, so I can get to it if I need. And the last thing I'm going to tell you about this that I really like is I'm just going to head back to where I started. Here's the article that I started with. This is the prompt engineering article. I'm just going to refresh the page. And notice when I refresh the page, I'm still in my web browser, but look what it did. It highlighted on the page, on top of the actual content, my highlights, and told me that I had a note and a tag on that. So I can view my stuff in the reader view,
Mhm.
but I can also view it here in the context of the actual document, which I think is huge. So I use this all the time, um, and I have it here, but I also have it as a standalone desktop app. And I know John put the QR code up there in the uh, top. There's the code for the reader promo. You get it's a paid app. You get a couple of months for free. If you use my promo code, I don't get
Mhm.
anything for it, but you get a couple months for free if you
Yeah.
use the promo
Yeah, I
code.
was gonna say that, like, this sounds like an ad, but, like, Andy's not making any money off of it. We
No.
just wanted to share that, like, this is how we collect things and organize them using this application.
Yep.
It is paid, so his link does give you an extra month, so you can get, like, 2 months for free instead of 1, but it's not like, neither of us have any affiliation with
Right.
Readwise or anything
No.
like that. It's just, like, you get an extra time if you want it.
I pay for
Um,
it. I love it. I think it's a great app. And so going back to the
yeah,
question, like, how do
I
you
pay for it too. It's like $100 a year or something like that, or 120 now, but
Yeah,
I'm
I
doing
think
the
it's like
same thing.
100. But
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of it, and if you go to their website, it's really detailed, and like they'll walk you through all the ins and outs of like getting started with it. I'll grab the URL, make sure everybody can get to that. Use
Yeah.
my promo code though.
I wanna see if I can export this or not. So, I wanted to just bring up my reader as well, just to show you guys, here's what I subscribe to. Like Andy talked about the feed that things come in. How do you get prompts? How do you figure out like things to save? So, this is me just sharing my feed here. And you'll notice like there's several ones in here that are YouTube channels. So like Matt VidPro AI, Mike, Jeremy, OpenAI, of course. These Matt Wolf, he's another AI guy. So these like AI centric ones, even if they're a YouTube channel that you subscribe to and you kind of bring it in this feed, um, it will give you the transcript of the video. So I watch it and it like follows along with the transcript. And then that way, if he like says a prompt or something like that, I'll highlight it from the transcript and then I'll be able to save that. And like Andy showed, I'll tag it as a prompt that I want to remember. And that's how like I'm extracting even from a video, because like Reader will give me the transcript and I can basically read the video that way. But there's like if you want to screenshot or go back in time later on and look at this, you can. But that's all of my feed. If you guys want to like kind of copy what I've got, if I figure out how to export it, I'll put like the XML or whatever in here in the video description. But that's what mine looks like. I will warn you, the Verge one just like floods the crap out of your feed. So
Yeah.
like I've got 58 unread messages today, from it. So that's just something to keep in mind. Um, but no, I think that is a really helpful tool. Um, I saw Denise mention another source here that is Daniel Miesler. I think is how you pronounce that, has GitHub prompts. So I'm going to look that up real quick off screen, and I'll share a link to that
Yeah,
because I know Denise can't put a link in the chat, but we can do it from here.
yeah.
So that's Daniel.
And there's a few different like prompt libraries that are out there. I know there's a couple on Discord. I've subscribed to in the past. It's just I like to kind of curate my own, so I have a little bit more control over like what's coming in, and sometimes like going to a place that's specific for that, I don't really get the context of like maybe how they used it versus like if they mention it in a LinkedIn post or as part of a demo in a YouTube video, it's a little bit more contextual for me, and that's kind of how I like pulling that back. But that's if we're pulling prompts like personal things. Somebody shared one they did on LinkedIn. They thought it was cool. I'll capture it. That's the tool that I use for capturing across like social media. And as I mentioned, it gives you the reader like view, like you would see in a Instapaper or a Pocket, but it also gives you the Feedly tool, which is great. But with that, let's talk about how do you capture prompts in your organization, because you don't necessarily you're not going to use maybe a reader tool in your organization for official work processes. So as you're building a Copilot community, we talked about this in our Teams Nation presentation last month. There's a couple of different ways to create communities, and two of the biggest ones for an enterprise in the Microsoft space is to use either Microsoft Teams or to use Viva Engage communities. And the one that you use, it just kind of depends on um, what the size of the audience, the maturity of the audience, how far along in your Copilot journey that you are. But for smaller organizations and smaller communities, I'm a big advocate of Microsoft Teams. We use a Microsoft Teams to create Copilot communities in the healthcare environment that I work in, and that allows us to create a central place to onboard people, to provide resources for those people that are onboarding and get them up to speed. A central place to host meetings and meeting content and announce upcoming meetings that we're going to have. A central place for like troubleshooting, but it also gives us a place to have conversations around specific Copilot experiences, including sharing prompts that are working and that we've gotten great results from. And we can have follow up conversations and we can learn some of the ROI around that. But we can also have like a success stories where people can highlight how they've been able to create some Copilot processes that are really, really powerful. Um, and maybe other people in the organization can take inspiration from that. So I'm a big advocate of using these communities as a way to gather these prompts and these success stories. That being said, I don't like having to sort through the conversations in order to find that. So I would come in and say, okay, this is the prompt. And I would just grab that. And in my case, I'm going to head over to my Loop workspace. Just within there, I'm going to go ahead, drop that prompt in. So this one's kind of a cross platform experience. So this one might be working with Teams and Outlook. So I might want to have like, multiple choices in there, but I'm going to put it in that notebook so that I can get back to it pretty quickly. But one of the ways that we share prompts and gather them is through either Microsoft Teams or Viva Engage or workshops, or somebody shares it in the chat as like part of a meeting. And now we
Mhm.
can start putting that into List or Loop, and we can start publishing it to our users. So there's a manual effort that goes along with that, but I think the outcome is going to be very high for the return that you're going to get off of that when you
Mhm.
start consolidating these prompts into a single place.
Yeah, that's something we're going to start doing in my community as well as the prompt of the week, um, where I'm doing my first live stream with our product manager Tom next week. That's called like "What's New and Next" with Copilot. We're talking about like the latest and greatest. As a segment of that show, we're going to do a prompt of the month, and it's going to be, "Hey, here's our favorite prompt. how it's useful, what it, what the concepts of prompt engineering are at play, right? So we kind of analyze the prompt and talk about like what makes it a good prompt, and then we're going to basically do a call to action and say, "Hey, community, what we want you to nominate the next prompt of the month," right? And hopefully get like a thread going on Viva Engage that's like, hey, this is what I'm using. It's like my silver bullet of a prompt, and we'll kind of pick like the top one out of that and share the next prompt of the month. So that's a way you get your community involved and you kind of keep this momentum going, as you were talking about. Like you're doing it, inside of your team's community. We're going to be doing it through Viva live stream.
Yep.
So yeah, cool example for sure. I like your like screenshots of the output,
Hmm.
kind of sharing like what it looks like. That makes it a little bit more real than like, here's the text of the prompt, just go try it. Um, yeah, seeing something work kind of, I think, like alleviates some people's like concerns about trying something new. If they like can see what it looked like for somebody else, they're like not afraid to try it. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, I like to show the screenshot version of it for a lot of those reasons, but also putting a
Hmm.
visual to something tends to gather more attention and click throughs. That's why things like carousels on LinkedIn work so well, and why I'm exploring those and like seeing what they can do. Um,
Hmm.
but the main thing I think to take away from this section is share your prompts, have
Hmm.
conversations around it, and like I've got a few different examples through the various channels here that have I've kind of like mocked up. Um, just to like give you some examples. So, for example, one of my colleagues said that using Copilot to help them confirm a roster with over 100 people and cross-referencing against
Hmm.
attendance list was like a huge time saver for them. They didn't have to do it manually, figure out how to sort it in Excel. Copilot was able to do that in a matter of seconds for them. Get chat highlights. So you can get highlights inside of from Microsoft Teams in a chat for like up to 30 days. And these are some of the parameters that are around that. Sharing that information and then a follow up prompt that actually uses that can be a big driver of user adoption and
Yeah.
showcasing what you can do with it. Let's see. I didn't fill out all these channels with demo data. I only did like a couple. Let's see, resources, providing resources in the community, but also if that resource had some prompts that were really high value, like at a glance people can say, hey, John and Andy were talking about this, oh, and here's a prompt that they use, that's pretty cool. Maybe I should go and check that out. And now you're giving a link and providing some context like around that. And then your
Hmm.
success stories, sharing a success story, but including the prompt that you use as part of that can really start to inspire some people to like really kickstart their journey with Copilot and prompting.
Hmm. One idea that came in my mind, I just put in the chat to get it out of my brain, is if you're using Viva Engage like we are, you could do hashtag share a prompt, and that's another way that like if you get people to kind of tag things, or you, the owner, you tag like if somebody shares something that is a prompt, then they could like kind of like roll up under that topic and you could see all the prompts in a list. And that's a way to like very loosely, organically start building a list of prompts that then kind of go back to our concept of organization, right? Like this could be like one of your sources that you guys start pulling from and putting into your proper library. But that's another idea. Like we had, and when we were doing it in Microsoft Teams, we made a channel called Share a Prompt, and it had the prompt library as a tab in it. What we ended up doing though was like we ended up moving over to Viva Engage, so now we're using like a topic for that instead. Because yeah, you don't have channels, so.
Yeah, and I think there's advantages to both of those different applications. It just depends on the
Hmm.
audience and how big it actually gets. But I just really want to encourage people to share your prompts, share them with other people, find a way to share it, whether it's in OneNote, in Microsoft List, in Microsoft
Hmm.
Loop, whether it's a custom app like the Prompt Buddy. or another mechanism. I think sharing it just kind of helps people to understand how to talk to Copilot or other generative AI, and you can really start
Yeah.
to get some really cool outcomes. And I'm just thinking out loud here, but since we've got a new website, 365deepdive.com, coming online here in the near future, maybe we can figure out a way to post a list of community prompts, or the prompt of the week or
That's a great
something.
idea.
That would be kind of fun to figure that out, and give you all some more value out of that new destination that we're creating for whatever this is
That's a
that
good
we do
idea.
every
Yeah, I
month.
want to I want to use that as like a place to like kind of just dump stuff, you know.
Yeah.
A prompt library would be cool. Another thing would be like we just talked about our feeds and reader. You know, we could like share those, you know, maybe I don't know, maybe we do those as like blog post sharing stuff
Yeah.
or I don't know. We'll have to talk about that offline, you know, and figure out like what to do with our website. Oh my god. Alexa, shut up. She just started like talking to me about a movie called Offline. Good grief.
Well,
Um,
speaking of, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel,
yeah,
365 Deep Dive. That is now live, and some of you have been streaming in from there today. So definitely scan the link, join us over there, engage in the community. We will let you know when we are officially launching the website. There's John's LinkedIn. If you are not
yep.
connected with John, make sure you do that. He's pushing out great content almost every single week. You were just on the Interzone with Mark
Yeah,
Cashman talking
yeah.
about that.
Next week, I think it's in 2 weeks. I think we're gonna have the intro zone talking about the Apple Vision Pro and like what it looks like from a very, very brand new perspective of like a whole lot of stuff doesn't work yet. But yeah. Oh, and a shout out. I was gonna mention this at the end too. So my new friend who works at Stanley in the Stanley IT department, um, he reached out to me on LinkedIn and was like, "Hey, I see you like drinking from a Stanley like month after month," and he sent me a shirt. So
Nice.
I'm repping the Stanley shirt today. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. My wife thought it was like incredible. She was like texting her mom, you know, and like my family members would be like, "Oh my god, John, you know, somebody from Stanley saw his YouTube."
That's pretty cool.
So, so thank you to that individual that sent me that. I love my Stanleys. My wife, she makes she's gonna get on to me again because she makes straw charms that go on the Stanleys, and it's like huge for like her wood shop that we run out of our house, and so that's why we're like every cup we have is a is a Stanley. So, um, but yeah, and did you share your LinkedIn yet? There's Andy's LinkedIn, and he's
I
been
do more
sharing a
than just
lot more
carousels.
frequently than I do. Yeah, the carousels are a big thing in Andy's LinkedIn. He's been doing a lot of really fun stuff building those, and I get to see the preview of them before he posts them. So
John's probably getting tired of me sending him like PowerPoint mock-ups where I'm like, check out this cool
yeah,
effect. And he's
yeah,
probably like,
yeah.
it
Look at
looks like the
this.
last one.
No, they're really cool. I think that's a really interesting way to communicate. And I've been seeing more and more people do those. So they're kind of like a rising trend,
Well,
I think.
it puts a visual to something, and it just makes it
Hmm.
stand out a little bit. So soon everybody's going to be doing carousels, and we'll have to find the next big thing. But it's been a
Yeah.
lot of fun making those. But I do more than just carousels over on LinkedIn. So um,
Hmm.
you know, follow, connect, whatever you want over there.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that brings
Cool.
us up to this the end of this live stream. This one's been a lot of
Hmm.
fun. If you have questions, let us know in the comments down below. We do monitor that, and we will try to follow up, or reach out to us on our various social media platforms. If you have an idea for our next show, we love engaging with the community, so let us know, and we'll see if we can make it
Yeah.
happen. Otherwise, be on the lookout for John on an episode of the Interzone coming up. Stay
Yeah.
tuned. We got a couple other announcements coming, the launch of the website, but also maybe some things, some speaking engagements that we've got on the horizon. And with that, I think we will see you in the next one.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Take care. See you next month.